This is the Tesla Beat podcast. We have Joe and myself. I believe Jeff and potentially Amy will be joining us. This is going to be a very, very special episode because we have literally probably the guy that in the Tesla community that invented braking. The guy probably does not sleep. He's always just tweeting about the latest Tesla news. And he has become such an amazing resource to the Tesla community because really he covers all things Tesla. Obviously, he branches out a little bit more than that. But if you have your notifications on for him, he doesn't just tweet, random things. It's always, for the most part, very specific, news related things. And so he is an amazing resource to the community. So I wanted to bring in the one and the only Sawyer Merritt. How's it going, Sawyer?
Thanks, guys, for having me. That was a great intro.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for your time. I know you're a very, very busy man. So thank you for joining us this Friday morning. For us, probably a little bit getting close to your noontime there.
Yep.
It looks like, all right, we got Jeff as a regular as well. How's it going, Jeff?
Jeff?
I think you're muted. But Sawyer, it's been we know it's been a really busy week. Q4 delivery numbers. We also had the full year scope. We also just had some breaking news last night. 2 new colors for the Model Y, along with the EPA estimates dropped for a lot of the Teslas. But I wanted to kind of just get your thoughts specifically on what you thought about the delivery numbers. And then also too, Jeff, feel free to jump in as well. But just get your thoughts, was this what you were expecting? Were you hoping for more? And then we can kind of just dive in.
Yeah, thanks. For the most part, what's going on, Amy?
Hi.
Amy.
Good to see you.
I had a coffee emergency.
No worries. For the most part, I think the delivery expectations were in line with our delivery results. Rather, were in line with expectations. I was expecting like 480-ish. I expected them to hit their 1.8 million volume delivery target for 2023. That's what they did. Slight beat, a few thousand units. It would have been a little bit higher if there was this ship going to Australia. They didn't have to turn back due to some bugs, I guess, on the ship or something. But as suspected, they did bunch in those Cybertruck deliveries in with the S and X deliveries category. So we don't really know how many Cybertrucks were delivered, but it's pretty immaterial at this point. So I don't think it really matters. S and X deliveries, on the other hand, we're at a 5-year high. I think there's multiple reasons for that. One is obviously the massive price drops during the year. Q4, you were allowed to transfer lifetime free supercharging for a lot of those older Model S and X's to a new one. And I saw a lot of people take advantage of that. And a few other little things. The Model X now qualified for the EV tax credit, so that probably helped as well. So I think there's a whole host of reasons, but nonetheless, they met their target for 1.8, so that's good.
Yeah. Jeff and Amy, what did you guys think about the Q4 delivery numbers and the targets?
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, I thought the numbers were solid. And what I liked is they beat every consensus number out there. There was like 2 or 3 different consensus views, and they were all beat. The S and X number, I mean, first off, they made this price move. I think it was the first week of September. I think a lot of people were getting wound up when they saw the Q3 results, and they're like, "Hey, why weren't there a bunch more S and X sold?" The reason is if you actually ordered a new S and X when that price change went in, most deliveries in most parts of the world weren't happening until Q4. So I think the price move was a big driver of that. And that was a big driver of the numbers. And now you've got Cybertruck ramping up going forward. So I thought the numbers were good. I think this is really coming down to how they guide and what kind of tone they set on the call for earnings third week in January.
Definitely. Amy, did you want to chime in?
Yeah. I suspected it would be right about 1.8 million. I was excited that it was above that. Remember that whole semiconductor chip thing where delivery thing where analysts or one manufacturer was falling way short. I believe that was the excess capacity that was booked. For they had booked supply capacity up to 2 million, and that in case that they wanted to get there, and then they went for the 1.8, which was always the guidance, so they beat the guidance. So we've known that since the fall, that 1.8 was going to be the number. And remember, over the 50% CAGR year over year, this is still a beat on that. Tesla is trending above that number that they originally promised. And I did have a post about that, which Elon Musk responded to, that this is true. People forget how to do an average. An average means some years less, some years more. And for next year, 2.5 million is on trend with a 50% multi-year growth. So let's set expectations where they should be. These are a couple of rebuilding years until they get the 25K car launched. They're putting all those pieces into place, and it's an incredible amount that they have to get ready. They have to have new factory and production lines. They have to get all the supply contracts in place. So behind the scenes, they're really setting the stage for the next explosion of growth while still meeting their guidance. And I don't know what other company does that. I have a question for Sawyer. What are you most excited about going forward, looking at Tesla?
I think, well, at least for this year, I think the most underappreciated aspect of Tesla's business is probably their energy business. I think it's already contributing to the bottom line. The growth is incredible. There is some, it's sort of like staggers or differentiates, or it's different per quarter rather, because sometimes it takes a little while to install these mega packs. So we sort of have this going out throughout the year. But the margins are quite incredible. And with this new mega factory coming online in Shanghai, I guess we expect now in Q3, it was supposed to be Q2. That should really help ramp things up to where Tesla can probably have capacity for, 25 to $30 billion per year, potentially in mega packs, which is pretty incredible. Long term, probably robotaxis and Tesla bot, but I think that's the easy cop out sort of answer. But this year, I think Tesla Energy is something to really focus on.
So,
in the last earnings report, the Lathrop factory utilization, I mean, wasn't close to being fully utilized. When I say fully, it should be around 80%. It wasn't close, and the gross margins were approaching mid to upper 20s, I believe. So, I'm pretty excited about what that can do as well. Not only from just deployment of a new technology, but it's also like what it's going to do to the actual earnings power of the company.
Yeah, I think it was 24.4%, I believe, the margin. Pretty incredible.
Yeah. And one other key factor of energy is cars being a very big purchase and a consumer purchase in most cases. Though Tesla is trying to ramp up their fleet business in some places, or at least testing it out, is always going to be a little bit dependent on what's happening with the macro. If people are a little worried about their jobs, if interest rates are higher, it's going to affect the sales of EVs. Energy, that is not the case. Energy will help insulate Tesla going forward, especially as this ramps up, from these large macro swings, because people always need energy. We know there's a waiting list for the mega pack. The market is so enormous. Remember, if all cars go EV, then we're going to need to double the size of the grid. And you can use mega pack installation to replace one of those peaker plants that would take 5 years to build, and you can put in a mega pack installation in just 90 days.
Yeah, one thing I'll note is with the mega pack business, at least in the US, the Inflation Reduction Act was passed in 2021, or maybe it was 2022, but I can't remember the exact year. But in the US, the mega pack qualifies for a 30% credit until 2033. And then you can actually get up to 70% if you meet certain other criteria. So for a lot of businesses and energy companies, it makes a lot of sense to get mega packs now, considering the cost benefits. You can potentially make money from it if you arbitrage correctly and use Tesla's auto bidder software, and you can potentially get up to 70% off. I think reaching that 70% is difficult, but you can at least get 30%. I think it's a no-brainer. And Tesla drops mega pack pricing. I think it was Q4, maybe it was Q3, by like 15 to 20%, which isn't small. So Makes a lot of sense from a money standpoint.
So Sawyer, what would you say when you look at 2024? What do you think are going to be potentially the biggest headwinds for Tesla? Like, is there anything that, I mean, not that things would keep you up at night, but when you think about, Tesla and what they're up against in 2024, all the stuff that they'll have to accomplish. Obviously, we're going to find out what they're going to guide to, hopefully at the end of this month when they give 2024 projections. But what do you think that is going to be the biggest challenges that they'll face this year?
I think a couple things. One is, I think finding enough demand. And because I say that because they have extra capacity right now that they could be using, but they're not. And I think they're starting they cut prices, and that helped some. But I actually think advertising and educating more and more people about the benefits of EVs and how safe Teslas are, how cheap they become. A lot of people have no clue that you can get one for like under $30,000 in some cases, including state and federal tax incentives. And a lot of people assume Volvos are still the safest vehicles on the road, but we know from crash test ratings around the world that that's not true. The Teslas are number one now. So I would say that I think advertising will help that. They've already started those efforts. I hope they ramp that into 2024. The next thing I'll say is Elon and Twitter, or X, I should say, and so the 2024 presidential election, I'm pretty sure we can guarantee some drama with some posts with him. But I think more and more people are becoming desensitized actually to his tweets, which I know I am. I don't really, I know he tweets political stuff all the time, and it's bothering me less and less, I think. And I think a lot of other people are probably starting to feel that way too. So those would be the two main things, I think.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I think those are good points. I think that when it comes to, especially, I mean, there's, as we know, I mean, we're not even like 10% like really across the globe. So I mean, there's just so many people that don't have EVs, that aren't even thinking about EVs. And you can see it from the videos that have been posted recently. People are like, what the heck is that? Looking at the Cybertruck, they didn't even know it existed. So yeah, it's pretty wild watching some of the videos that people are like, what the heck? And it's just really trippy. But my focus, is always on the minority culture and looking at that subset of people and realizing like that. Yeah, I mean, that price point is just like right in their wheelhouse. These people are out buying like Chargers and Hemis and what I mean, and everything else, instead of like looking at a safer, faster vehicle in a Tesla, because they don't know any better, right? And so I think like that education goes a long way with getting a good subset of people that could definitely boost the numbers. People always talk about demand and those type of things, but there's just so many people that are unaware that it just, like, once that pendulum switches, it's going to be insane to think of like where this company could grow. It's just wild. But as far as the Elon thing goes, like, I've never worried about what he says so much as what the company does. And that's where my focus has always been, is looking at what Tesla does as a whole, as opposed to what the CEO of the company says. Like, I mean, Merritt has said a lot of things. You know what I mean? Like, she's invested in, I think, more up and coming startups than anybody, and they are just like super in debt, and they're not doing half the things they said they were, and it's like nobody really cares. So I just look at what the company does.
Yeah, I think. Oh, sorry, Amy, were you gonna go?
Yeah, I would say that the 4680 ramp is something that I'm keeping a close eye on. The 4680 is going to enable, in my opinion, the 25K car. So we need them to be ramping that. We know that there's some initiatives they're working on the cell chemistry inside the 4680 form factor to improve the amount of range that they might be able to get out of that battery. So that's something I'm definitively looking at. And then just ramping is difficult. Tesla has a lot of initiatives going on all at the same time. And let's take a step back and acknowledge how incredible that you have all these players out there in the field of AI. And so many of them have billions being pumped in by venture capitalists. Tesla is one of the leading AI companies, and they're self-funded and they're profitable while doing that. So that extreme focus that Tesla is going to need to have as they ramp the Cybertruck, as they ramp 4680 production, as they look at expanding out in different factories, there's always little glitches that can happen within that within that type of environment where you're just this high accelerating growth that Tesla is doing. And then as far as Elon Musk is concerned, let's remember his incentive package has expired. He met the last 12th tranche. He hasn't exercised all those options because that will be a taxable event. He'll have to sell some shares to cover the taxes. And some people are still wounded after the last time he sold shares. So I think for shareholders, he's holding off on that for a little bit. But he is working for free right now. So you can say what you want about what he's posting, but Tesla has no incentive package for Elon Musk. And he is still sitting there working, taking time away from his family, crisscrossing the globe, meeting with world leaders on behalf of Tesla. We do need to fix this. He does need a new incentive package. But it is actually incredible what he is doing on all of our behalves.
Yeah, I think a new incentive package is definitely important.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Like, I mean, he's putting in way more hours than we are.
I'll also add that this year Tesla has probably more to juggle from a new model, refresh model standpoint than ever. They have obviously the new Model 3 that came out in Shanghai. That's probably close to being fully ramped, if not already there. We have a potentially new Model Y launching this year in Shanghai, maybe the US. New Model 3 is coming to North America. Of course, the Cybertruck ramp. And then Lars said volume production is supposed to start on the Semi this year. I'm skeptical of that, considering the building isn't done yet or they haven't even started on it, I don't think. So there's a lot to juggle, but I think they'll get there.
Yeah, I think there's a kind of a big underpinning happening right now with these new model transitions. And it's an interesting thing that I don't see analysts talking about right now. Is this transition to the 25K vehicle that for Tesla from a volume perspective, the volume on this vehicle, the run rate could be higher than everything that's in the current auto portfolio today, which they already shipped the highest volume automobile in the world. And now you're going to say they're going to ship something that may be many times that in magnitude. That I would anticipate right now that they've selected their initial suppliers, but they haven't awarded share necessarily. And they're in this stage right now over this coming year where they're going to nail down share awards, by supplier and all the partners that are going to be involved with producing that vehicle, whether services partners or so forth, or again, just regular suppliers. So I just think they have a tremendous amount of COGS leverage that they will probably be exercising over the coming year. And I think they're going to surprise. I think they're going to start surprising here very soon. I know there's a lot of skeptics on what's happening with gross margins. I think there was an analyst note from Morgan Stanley that was saying that they expect margins to go into the 12 to 13% range. I don't, unless something happens, very bizarre from a macro perspective and an auto macro perspective. By the way, GM came out and says they expect the auto SAAR for this year to be 16 million units, which is in line with the prior year, maybe a little bit stronger. Unless something bizarre happens, I don't see that happening with gross margins. I do see them re-strengthening there, not necessarily going back to where they were before per se, but definitely strengthening. I do think they're going to take a pretty significant reduction in COGS as long as they can, fill up the remainder of, Austin and Berlin. And I do agree with Amy's point. The 4680 will be a critical factor in doing that and in dealing with the COGS drag. So I think there's a very big transitioning happening with the Tesla supply chain, and what Sawyer brought up regarding the new model transitions kind of triggered that thought for me again. But I can't underestimate from a volume perspective what they're doing. and they're probably doing initial selections right now for the bot. And I can't imagine the competitive nature there's going to be to get this business with Tesla. And if you look at their prior years, they've delivered for their suppliers, whereas the other folks that are making EVs are tending to disappoint more times than not, and actually putting them in a much worse spot. So I think this whole year is going to be very interesting. It's not going to get reported on, but I think it's going to be very interesting what's happening from a supply chain perspective.
About a year and a half ago, Ford, they said they expected to be on a 600,000 unit a year run rate by the end of 2023.
Yep.
They're not even close to that, not even barely 20%. Going back to Tesla, though, the general feeling that I have heading into 2024, I think is quite opposite than the sentiment that was heading into 2023. Put the stock aside for a moment. I think a lot of people were expecting quite a bit in 2023, but were disappointed with the price cuts, the earnings drop, various other things, the volume growth. I think people expected to be closer to 2 million. Whereas this year, I think expectations are a lot more realistic. Me personally, I do not expect Tesla to guide with that 50% compounded annual growth rate for this year, because that would mean closer to 2.55 million deliveries. I think that's too high. I'm more in the realm of 2.2, 2.3 maybe. I think that's more realistic. If they beat that, great. But I think people have more realistic expectations. That's the sense that I get heading into this year.
Well,
yeah.
Well, when you look at what's happened with the broader industry, and like Jeff always mentions the capitulation of all of the legacy autos, and how people have just backed away from making EVs, right? And then you have BYD and Tesla just accelerating production and in sales and everything else like that. You have to kind of have that view and understanding that eventually this has to click with mainstream media and with the stock market, with the just a broader look at, okay, well, everybody else is saying this, but this is actually what's happening. That has to click with some people. So I think for us, we're following everything. So I think we have that broader view. And so we look at it with the expectations of, well, if they just keep doing what they're doing, of course it's 2.5, but yeah, realistically they could do 2.2, 2.3. It's still great. It's just still great. No matter what they do, it's going to be awesome. Even if by 2030, if they're able to sell 20 million vehicles while being in second place or third place or whatever, I'm not going to care what place they're in. They set their expectations, they made their goals, and they reached it, and that's really all that matters to me.
Yeah, can I do just a simple to add to Joe's point and Sawyer's point? I keep going back to this in North America. If the SAR is going to be 16 million units and the EV adoption rate, I think we're going to leave this year at 9%. Let's let them report the number. Let's say the EV adoption rate continues to slow down and it's only 12% in the coming year. Again, that's I would say a fairly conservative estimate. That means you're going to be at 1.9 or 2 million EVs just in North America sold in the retail. And then, so you start doing the math on that, and Tesla in Q4, they had 55% market share. That was the run rate in Q4. Who's introducing new models? Who has the supply going into next year? And if Tesla was going to be around 600 or 650K in North America this year, I don't know what the exact number is going to show. It's going to be somewhere in that area. Well, that's a pretty, if they're running at 55% right now, what models from what companies or what supply increases are going to come on from which auto companies that would take that number down meaningfully? I don't have an answer to that. I can't point to that product, that model, because they're not introducing them or they're pulling back on the CapEx. So is there a path in North America for Tesla to go from 650 to somewhere closer to 1 million? Well, that's a big chunk of the increase, coming off of 1.8. And then you start looking at China and Europe for the rest. I just see a fairly big jump in North America when I look at the competitor capitulation. I look at the 7,500 going to point of sale here at some point. And I look at this kind of being a gap year where there's not a lot of new models, and they don't put the supply behind those models because they're money losers for them. So anyway, there's my range has been like 2.2 to 2.4 for the coming year, but I could see the upper end of my range going to 2.5, to be honest with you, and I would be happy with anything over 2.2. But I there are reasons for that to go even higher, just given what's happening out there.
I think one thing to be bullish on for 2024 that maybe not a lot of people recognize is that point of sale credit or rebate that you talked about, Jeff, in that it'll enable an estimated 250 million Americans, up from 75 million in 2023, to get that full $7,500 discount directly off the purchase price of their Tesla. So I hope Tesla conveys that clearly, and so that people understand that, because it won't matter as long as you request that Tesla transfer, or you transfer the point of sale credit to the dealer, i.e. Tesla, then you have hundreds of millions of Americans that can take advantage of this, whereas it was well under 100 million Americans last year. So it could be a big deal. We'll see.
Yeah, I would say there's a couple catalysts coming. That we just saw the first Cybertruck delivered to Pharrell Williams. What's his last name? We had the Cybertruck in the rap video with Travis Scott a couple of years ago. So as the Cybertruck gets out on the roads, being driven by people's heroes, that is going to have a halo effect that spills over to the rest of Tesla sales. And then if you look at the new Model 3 that is now being sold in Asia and Europe, it has been tremendously popular, and we would anticipate seeing that coming to the U.S. I do think that's one of the reasons behind the change of the guidance in the tax credit, is because that was using the CATL battery in Asia and Europe. Doesn't mean that that's who they choose for a battery supplier in the U.S., but we know that Chinese battery companies did not qualify for the IRA credit, or at least only in small percentages if they qualify.
Yeah, I think it'll be a really, really interesting year, especially on the supply chain. I think actually when you break it down like that, I think it's pretty helpful. And I think with companies stepping back, especially on the EV adoption, like pulling back on production for like the Ford F-150 Lightning, the Chevy Bolt, they can not, I'm not going to say easily, but they can get to these numbers. Like the math can get there. It's not too far-fetched, especially too, in my opinion, as the narrative continues that EV demand is slowing down. I think that can benefit Tesla the most, because at the end of the day, they still have the best product on the market. So if that narrative continues, like, I think the only person that is going to, or the company that's going to continue to win and continue to take the market share, is going to be Tesla. And I am excited. Hopefully they announce the Giga India as well this year, along with getting this Highland Model 3 that has been seen pretty much at the Fremont factory. I saw one and a Cybertruck about a week ago, so they're not even really hiding it really anymore as far as like it driving around. I think even in Palo Alto, when you would drive around, they would still cover it for a minute, but now it's, so I think that's also going to pull people who bought the Model 3 back in 2017, 2018, who maybe have some of the original ones. I think that could pull them forward, but I do think that this year will be interesting, especially with it being, an election year. Potentially, hopefully, some of these rates, the Fed drops the rates to make things a little bit easier to buy. So there's a lot of like macro stuff I think that's going on, but should be a really, really exciting year, I think, overall, just given their roadmap. Amy, did you want to say something?
No, go ahead. Finish what you're saying.
Oh, I was done.
Oh, okay. Well, then I do. If you look at most analysts on Wall Street, I don't normally like to talk about share price, but given that we all think the guidance is going to be a little bit lower than where some retail investors expect it to be for next year's volume, let's just touch on this briefly. Most Wall Street analysts have Tesla's growth not at 50% on average year over year, but a lot closer to 30%. So you might get a sell on the news. Guidance retail investors would find disappointing for this year because it is some years less, some years more. But that's not what Wall Street has in their models. And if you also look at Wall Street, what they don't have in their models is what Sawyer was talking about, energy. Energy barely is a part of the models. And why is that? Is because before Tesla had Lathrop, they didn't have volume production. There wasn't some meaningful guidance and numbers that analysts could include in their model. And they're still not including it yet because last quarter was the first quarter where energy and services together was a meaningful contributor to revenue. So analysts didn't have to include it and they wouldn't miss by much and it would just be an upside surprise. So there is a disconnect right now between all of Tesla's initiatives and all the possible areas of growth and what Wall Street is including in their valuation of Tesla. And that's simply because even though Tesla is in the lead in many of these areas, like I believe they're in the lead in FSD, I believe they're in the lead for Optimus, I believe that they're doing really well in AI, but none of that is really included in the models yet because Wall Street needs numbers. They need they need run rates, they need projected size of the market. All of these things aren't in there yet, but it's going to be a couple of volatile years here while Tesla keeps moving these pieces into place for the next explosion of growth.
So Sawyer, I just wanted to ask you, what did you think about the changes that also came last night with the EPA? Was that a shocker to you, or obviously it sounds like there's new standards that are that need to be applied in best and worst conditions, and it's like the average of the two that ends up coming up with the EPA estimate. But what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we were expecting some new Model Y in 3 colors at some point. So I guess we got these now. If you include the Model 3, this is actually the first time the Model 3 Y family has gotten a new color in about 7 years. So it's a long time coming. I'm glad they got some new colors in there. In terms of the drop in range that we saw on the website last night, it was a bit perplexing when not knowing the reason at first, but I did some digging with some other people, and the reason we saw a drop, the Model Y saw roughly, depending on the trim, a 7% drop in range, and then the Model X saw an up to 10% drop in range, EPA range. Some models didn't see too much of a change. I think some models even saw an increase. But in general, the EPA now mandates all EV manufacturers that sell in the US to test acceleration and ride height modes in both best and worst case scenarios. And then you have to average these modes, which results in an increased consumption rate and slight reduction in overall range. So essentially, they did this to better reflect real world range performance, which is a good reason, I guess. We want the most realistic numbers we can get. And then this new policy is applicable to new testing for 2024 model years and later vehicles, which leads me to believe, because we didn't see any changes in range for the Cybertruck last night, that they already took these new testing methods into account when they release those numbers in late November. But in general, all EV manufacturers are going to be impacted by this, not just Tesla. The other EV manufacturers, I don't think, have updated their websites yet. I'm really curious to see if Lucid will see their 500+ mile sedan drop below that 500-mile range with these new methods. We'll have to see about that. But overall, I think this is a positive thing to see more realistic real-world range performance. So it's fine.
Yeah, I think the Model S, the long range didn't. It's still at 405, I believe, right? It was unchanged. So I think that's good. So it'll be interesting, as you said, with Lucid, with their flagship car, if that changes and being able to be, having that 500-mile king, or that crown jewel of that.
Yeah.
But Joe, did you have something?
Yeah, I wanted to ask Sawyer about the Mattel, the strike that's happening over there, and your thoughts around that whole thing and how that might be coming to an end.
Yeah, I'm not like a huge expert on that topic, but I will say that I think Tesla's going to be pretty steadfast in their ways and not want to accept almost anything. I don't think they want anything to do with unions anywhere. But with Sweden, this is a difficult situation. There aren't too many Tesla sales in Sweden. They did have a good year last year. So it's not a huge market, but nonetheless, I think what happens in Sweden will have potentially an impact all around in various countries in Europe, depending on the outcome that happens. If they, for whatever reason, agree to some sort of unionization, I doubt they ever would, then you might see that sort of trickle into some other European countries. I don't think that's likely. It doesn't seem like they're making a whole ton of progress either. So I don't really know what happens in the next, coming days and weeks. It's it's a difficult situation because you have this online EV manufacturer that doesn't want to do unions, but Sweden is a huge union country. So I'm not even sure that the Swedish Tesla employees there want this. So I don't know if the Metal is like trying to force their ways on the employees that don't want it. I don't know. It's a crazy situation.
Yeah, I think the regulatory and labor items are, if you ask me, like, what are some of the risks going into this year? If you look at the funding sources for some of these things and you look at how they're funded, it does concern me that is only going to increase, because it's difficult to find a way to beat Tesla, because EV adoptions, first off, when you survey people, like what's their next vehicle and what they want to buy, these surveys are consistently showing anywhere from 30 to 60% of people that are surveyed say they want an EV. And I know there's people that are like clapping and saying, wow, it's 30, it's a low number. Now it's actually a very high number when only 8 or 9% of the people in the US are currently buying an EV today. So the surveys are very high. The EV adoption continues to grow. The net promoter score, this is how, like, very serious organizations that are focused on quality, focused on consumer satisfaction, they look at net promoter score. And Tesla not only has the best net promoter score in the auto industry, they actually have a best net promoter score across multiple industries. So that means people, when your net promoter score is high, that means people that buy your vehicle would recommend it to other people to purchase, and would purchase it again themselves. And so when you put all these factors together, I do worry a bit that there's not a conventional way to beat Tesla. And they'd have to go the regulatory route, whether it's really pushing labor towards, this mass unionization, which I don't think we've heard the end of in North America and other countries, and this regulatory scrutiny around FSD. And so I think the way Tesla navigates through these things, by the way, I actually think they've been navigating quite well through some of these things. And I think it's going to be interesting to watch, because when I look at risks, I do see regulatory risk as being kind of one of the issues that does concern me with kind of gating the results of the company. But like I said, I think they've been handling it quite well.
Amy, I think you had something to say.
Yeah, I would say that I have actually been seeing a lot more pushback from Tesla on the regulators. A lot of it public on X, with top executives sharing tweets and taking senators. One of the things they did that on was the active safety results. The Tesla's active safety results are so much better than everybody else. There was that video in the European Union of the Teslas of all these other manufacturers, and they would hit the person, they would hit the bicyclist, and the Tesla would stop, because the Tesla active safety is based on this vision technology. So the Tesla is tracking, that's a person on the curb, that's a dog on the curb, that might run out into the path, and it has that few seconds of heads up warning, whereas cars that are lidar or sensor based have to wait for an object to get truly in the path before they can react. And you can see the difference on it. So anyways, the Tesla is navigating that well. As Sawyer suspected, in Sweden, over 80% of the employees at Tesla Sweden do not want the union. So it is a very small section of employees that the union got in to say that they wanted it. And that's one of the reasons why Tesla is holding fast, because they don't want their employees to have, if you're a member of a union, I love my union, because it is, for pilots, a very different type of union. We're trying to keep this guy safe by making sure that we get rest, by making sure that that passenger safety things are where they need to be. But I'm paying union dues for that. You take a chunk out of your paycheck and you send it off to the union. And over 80% of Tesla's employees in Sweden don't want to do that. They don't want any part of it. So why should Tesla knuckle down to a few that are trying using mafia-like tactics, holding off their license plates and not letting them deliver cars? Would be a very poor precedent, as Sawyer said, and as Jeff was alluding to, for Tesla to set. Elon Musk will not be bribed. Elon Musk will not be threatened. That comes in his personal life, and that comes along with his businesses. And people are going to realize this.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I mean, here we are in America, right? But when you look at some of the tactics that these companies are trying to deploy overseas, it's like, what? They're doing what? And nobody's doing anything. And I mean, the whole thing is pretty bizarre. But I like the fact that the 80% of the staff doesn't want it. But I also like the fact that the sales in Sweden were like up this year, despite all of that, even though they tried to like cripple them. Imagine what the sales would be had they not been crippled them, you know what I mean? Or even tried, like it would have just been like off the charts. So, and I think that speaks to Tesla overall, and just this demand is that if you have a good product, people want it and people will go through great lengths to get it. And that is the overarching freaking tale of the greatness of Tesla. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, we follow it every day and we like the company, but realistically, like there's people out there that don't care about me being the president of the club, don't care about the club, but they just know that this is the best vehicle for them. It's the safest, and that's all they care about. And when you look at those overarching things that just seem to just happen because it's just a good product, and you wonder, like, how come like all the other companies aren't selling products? Because it just doesn't have that great of an enticing story behind it. Like, it doesn't have the safest. It's not, you know what I mean? It doesn't have the greatest charging network. I mean, pretty soon everybody's going to have it, but the products themselves, like the simplicity of the car, the interior design, and all these things, like it just goes a long way with a lot of people.
Yeah, no, I think those were all great points, especially too, at least from the research that I've done. I know that even Tesla workers in the U.S., they make more than the union workers. I think it was what AOC and some of the other, probably Elizabeth Warren and some of the others just saying like unions were the way to go. But I know that Tesla employees would be, as they are in Sweden, right? I think those numbers would be similar in the US just because of the stock price. I've literally met service techs who've come to my house who the only way they are able to live here and work it here is because the stock has done so well, and they've made Elon's even said it, it's the only company, or it's probably the company that's made the most millionaires ever, potentially. And so it's pretty incredible to, if you've been at Tesla really probably 5-6 years, depending on the equity you've gotten, you've probably done fairly well. But one thing I was going to ask Sawyer was, in 2024, like, what are your, like, if you were to potentially throw out some crazy predictions, like what would be some of those things that maybe would trigger people, but just, some exciting predictions that you would have for this upcoming year that are potentially that people maybe aren't thinking about. I think one thing that, even Sandy threw out is that he even thought that potentially Optimus is actually going to be in the factories this year. So that was like one prediction he threw out, but I would love to get your thoughts on, maybe some sleepers that people are just not thinking about.
The Optimus line that Sandy said was going to be mine, but I realistically, I think it's longer than that. Some crazy thing. I don't know if I have any crazy predictions. Maybe this will actually be the year where Elon says, FSD is here, or like it's feature complete, and it actually is. It's been 6 years by the end of this year, it'll be complete. He says FSD is, really huge and a game changer. I hope he's right about that. I hope it meets the hype. every release we see a lot of people hype it up, but I think for a lot of people it ends up being disappointing. But they've been taking a long time with FSD 12, so I hope it really meets the hype. So maybe I would put out there that FSD progresses quicker this year than most people are expecting. It's not really a crazy prediction, but that's just a prediction.
I guess it depends on who you talk to.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, FSD, like, I was one of the first public beta testers with Raj, and it's been, we're doing 3.5 years now. It's
I remember that
definitely,
night you guys went out together. That was wild.
Yeah, it was wild. I mean, I think that what was truly genuine about that experience was that, you're turning on a computer or a car, literally a car that can take you somewhere, and you have no idea how it's going to do. It can do the exact worst thing at the worst time. But it definitely has made like I'm driving to work most days where there's zero disengagements. It's a little bit sometimes harder during traffic hour, depending on what's going on. But the amount of improvement over even 3.5 years has been pretty incredible. But yeah, I think there's still this like last mile that they need to kind of leap over, but it also could be probably the hardest mile to jump. And so, because as you're fine tuning, like, how do you get from 95 to 100%, like completely being perfect? And maybe you don't ever get there, but it's just like nudging those small percentage points are going to potentially be the hardest, as they've pretty much solved, like, especially in the suburbs. I mean, even mountainous roads that I've done, like, it does really well. It's just going to be one of those things when you go into the urban, like, San Francisco and some of these other places, and sure, it still makes mistakes even in the suburbs, but it's going to be those things where in the cities is going to be probably the hardest place to tackle, in my opinion.
I think another issue that a lot of people feel like is because Tesla was for the longest time a California-based EV maker. Now their headquarters is in Texas, but a lot of their FSD engineers and their engineering HQ are still in California. A lot of people feel like FSD is sort of tuned for the dry, safe roads of California rather than, like, let's say snowy places where I live in New Hampshire, where it's just like you can get a foot of snow. FSD becomes really difficult to use. In the future, can FSD handle tricky situations like that reliably and safely without any disengagements? So I'm going to be excited to use FSD 12 when it comes out on my mother's Model Y. She has one, because I hope it meets the hype. But it's a perfect time to test it since it's winter.
Yeah. I think what was most interesting about FSD 12 is it's a complete change of the architecture of FSD. And Karpathy said that you needed to go through all the previous versions to get to this one. But the end-to-end neural nets, so taking the 300,000 lines of code down to maybe 3,000 lines of code, but now it needs to be trained. They need to allow these end-to-end neural nets to watch a lot of videos, to be trained in these different ways, to train on those edge cases like snow in New Hampshire. At the same time, I will use Jeff's word, we were seeing capitulation in legacy manufacturers. We're also seeing capitulation in other FSD scenarios. If you look at Cruise, it turned out that they were intervening every 3 miles, having a person intervene, which brings me to what my surprise might be for 2024. And that's the fact that Tesla has these inference compute in the FSD computers that sit in every car. And this is actually a game-changing thing. There is no other AI out there that I know that can run a portion of their large model locally on a 100-watt computer. And there's a lot of other things that Tesla could do with this technology. We know it's going to go into the bot. What else is Tesla going to do with it? And then my question would be, do we hear the 25K car announced before the end of the year? And I think personally, that's going to be largely dependent on the macro environment. Elon Musk very definitively said that he no longer wants to be pedal to the metal if the macro is going to be worse, because there's all these other projects that Elon Musk and Tesla want to fund with AI, with the bot. And like I said, they're doing this themselves. They're funding this immense amount of expensive research, $2 billion on AI this year. and being a profitable company at the same time. And Tesla wants to guard that profitability.
I'm a little different on the lower priced vehicle, because I think for Tesla it hits a different speed and ramp of what they're doing for a vehicle. I don't think they announce that or even show that until they're actually willing to sell it, because this is a vehicle that they're going to have to, in the first year, it's got to sell probably like 1 million units. You know what I mean? Like, it's got to be quick to ramp, quick to build, and everything like that. And so I don't see them really like breaking that news until they're actually able to put that on the market. And I think once it gets to the market, it's going to go balls to the wall, like super fast ramp, super, because I mean, that's got to get to a wider spectrum of people. I do not see them just announcing it just to announce it. I don't see that happening.
Jeff, did you have any predictions for this year?
Yeah.
Or out of the box predictions?
Yeah, I do think. I think Sawyer and Amy set it up a bit, but I do think that there will be an FSD licensing partner emerge. The integration time from starting to work together to getting to production is probably a couple of years. I think Elon has said this as well. And so if you couple that with the capitulation that's happening in their autonomy business, you saw what happened with Ford, and you saw what happened now, what's happening with Cruise in front of our eyes. And you look at some of the solutions in China, I know they're heavily touted, but even if you listen to, like, for example, the CEO of Li Auto, he'll say, like, look, our solution in the cars, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 in the car. We know the Tesla one's under $1,500. I think it's under $1,200 for the client solution that's running in the car. So Tesla's kind of built this better mousetrap, and they have these 5.5, 6 million robots now capturing more data than anyone else. It is the best setup, I think, for anybody, any partner that would want to join and start working with Tesla. First off, it looks like they have the highest probability of a solution that will both work for consumers and then eventually work for a robotaxi fleet. But just start with the consumer side of it. It can be a very big upsell to your consumer base, and all you've got to do is work with Tesla on integration, and then you can grab that margin and sell that option to if you're a Ford, for example, you can sell it to your consumers. So I think an FSD license partner being announced would be good. I think will happen. And I think that will get analysts kind of rocking back in their chair and start thinking about, this is a lot more of a sum of the parts company and valuation than it is this straight line automobile business. I think the charging infrastructure piece started that conversation last year. And I think when FSD license partners start emerging, I think that will really accelerate that sum of the parts conversation and the valuation of the company. The other thing, I don't think it's going to be a surprise, but I do think FSD is going to expand globally, and that's going to be a big deal, not only from a quarterly gross margin perspective, but just really getting closer and closer to it not being a beta product and being something that's just fully released and in use. So I'm really excited for that. I don't think analysts right now, analysts are looking at how many automobiles are shipped and what's the gross margins, and they're backing into an EPS number. And if you're a long-term investor and you've kind of like sat back and watched this, they miss these big disruptive moves because of their approach to conventional valuation. So I think these unconventional things are now starting to pile up for Tesla, and they're getting closer and closer. And one of them just is going to like spring his head up and say, "Hi, I'm here." I think it's going to be FSD licensing first, FSD expansion probably together with it, and I do think the 25K car, I do think it gets revealed. And I think the launch is going to be an extremely different launch than any prior Tesla. If I were in Tesla's position, I would want hundreds of thousands of these built prior to this going to sale. Again, I would want some out for user feedback, but the point is it's going to need to be a much bigger ramp. It's going to need to be pulled forward, because this is not the vehicle you want to be on a 6 to 9 month waiting list at this price point. So I think those are the couple things I'm looking for this year.
Yeah, they are building that tunnel the Boring Company's building a tunnel at Giga Texas that leads right over to that one area where they have like this structure. So that could potentially be like what you said, like, I mean, they're gearing up for that because, yeah, you do not want to be on a waiting list for this cheap vehicle that's supposed to be for everybody. Like, nobody's going to want to wait 8 months for that. What were you going to say, Sawyer?
I was just going to add that as a Tesla investor, you can probably feel good about that. There are a lot of aspects of Tesla's business that either a lot of people don't even know about or price into their estimates. Robotaxis being one, Tesla bot, energy storage, like Tesla Energy. How many people put that into estimates or even know about it? Not that many. The list goes on and on. So I think long term that you can look at that and be like, okay, there's a lot of potential here for price discovery when these things start to really come into fruition, like Jeff said. And I think FSD is probably the closest one out of the Tesla bot and FSD.
Yeah, I think for my prediction, I think I'm just going to call it because I know it's been in the works. Cybertruck gets announced to go into Europe. That's a little bit out there, but you know, hopefully that happens. I would love to see a Cybertruck in Amsterdam, even though there's more bikes than people there. And then I think it would be probably similar to some of the stuff, or I agree with a lot of the things Jeff, well, really everyone was saying. I think the other one would be, you know, I think they're gonna announce the or the $25,000 car. I don't know exactly how it really depends, in my opinion. Again, depending on if they're making it driverless versus not. I think they're gonna have to have a steering wheel in it. But I know Elon said in the Sandy Monroe interview that, you know, he's reviewing the production line every week. And as we know, with a lot of things Tesla's doing, even with the Cybertruck production line, like we know at one point they were even doing stuff out of the Fremont factory. I think they had the tent up for various parts when, you know, it was being built out. But I know that Tesla is just 3 to 5 steps ahead. I mean, it sounds like, you know, they've been even producing these refreshed Model 3s for a minute already. And so, you know, I do think that they are making headway on this. They obviously they're still making probably design changes and things like that, but they're definitely thinking about this production line. It sounds like it's next level. It's unlike anything that anyone has ever seen on the production line. If you just think of the basics too of the Model Y, stepping from the Model Y to the Cybertruck, just in technology and manufacturing, I mean, you're talking next level. I mean, you think that they can get far with just the Model Y. I mean, the Cybertruck and the technology that's coming with the Cybertruck it's really just next level. So I'm really looking forward to this year. It's going to be a very strong year. And Tesla, I think, is, as he said back at shareholder day, you know, the next 12 months are going to be pretty raw, but at the same time, like, Tesla should come out on top. And I think, you know, we're getting towards March, and that's pretty much been the story in that legacy auto continues to take 5 steps back and Tesla continues to take 10 steps forward. So
except with the Roadster. Rip those people, right? Like, damn.
Yeah, well,
especially the Foundation Series people, they had to put the whole 250,000 down.
I'm not going to talk about that, but and who knows?
I mean, it's just like, you know, I mean, there's so much planned for the future, but none of it involves Roadster. That's like, wow.
I know. And yeah, that's a different story. I mean, who knows if I think their last estimate was 2025 and they want to do it. But it's just when they think of the priorities. I mean, they even said, you know, Elon was saying the Cybertruck, like FSD, is like the lowest priority. And I'm like, crap, man. Like, this is going to be my next car. I don't want to be driving myself around. And, you know, and so, but at the end of the day, when you think of the priorities, you know, millions of cars that are going to get us to autonomy versus like, you know, 1 to 200 deliveries and then, you know, several thousands this year, if not tens of thousands. But it just doesn't make sense when you think of their mission. And so that's, you know, and I've had to learn that the hard way. I mean, partially when, you know, even in Australia, when they're getting rid of, the right-handed steering for the Model X and some, you know, some of the other stuff, it's just, they are going to prioritize, you know, what will help the masses versus, you know, just here and there. Like even my Model X, it's vertical screen. They're not updating a lot of the OS, because it's just, when you think of, again, the millions of cars on the road, it's a low priority. So
I think
but yeah,
2024 in general is a year that we're sort of waiting for a lot of things to play out. But you can sort of see that this year, and just in general, that there are a lot of things that Tesla has been working years and years for and on that are starting now to come to fruition, and will over the course of the next year or two. I think FSD being one of them. And honestly, for me, the Tesla bot progress has been a lot quicker than I thought it would be. It's pretty incredible. So I'm more bullish on that than I was before, because I thought it would take years and years. This would be like a 2030 thing or something. But every 3 months they're like coming out with an update now, and it's just a lot better than it was just a few months ago. So there's a lot to be excited about heading into this year and going forward. But yeah, a lot to play out.
Definitely. Well, thank you. First off, I know we're lapping an hour right now. So first off, thank you to our regular hosts, Amy, Jeff, and Cybertruckless Joe, for joining us, and obviously, our special guest today, Sawyer, for joining us. Thank you for taking an hour away from your breaking tweets to join us. So thank you again for all you do. I know it's, you are a source to follow for the Tesla community. And I think it's been, especially as time has gone on in the community, it's been really refreshing to kind of see how, people have played different roles. So thank you again. Make sure you give him a follow if you're not already following. He's tagged both on X and on YouTube in the description. So thank you again, Sawyer. Hopefully everyone has a great weekend, and Happy New Year.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thanks.
Thanks, Sawyer.
Cool. It's a good interview.